Lovely. Okay. Would you like me to introduce myself?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so my name's Natascha Eden. I'm nurse consultant here in CAMHS, and today's session is to do with emotional dysregulation in young people. And what I thought we would do today was really think about, I suppose, some of the more practical things that you can do to support a young person if they're struggling with regulating their emotions. So what I've actually done today is adapted really some of the sessions that we would be doing with young people, but to kind of have a look and think about maybe looking at how we would do those, so how parents might be able to do some of that with young people. So hopefully that will be helpful. So these skills have been adapted from DBT, which is dialectical behaviour therapy. I don't know what people know about DBT. I don't know if it would be helpful if I just perhaps...
I think it would be really useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so dialectical behaviour therapy was a type of therapy developed by a psychologist called Marsha Linehan. And Marsha Linehan was a psychologist in America, and she actually struggles herself with some of these things. So she developed a therapy to help people with three main things, really. So to help people who struggled with their emotions, so people who experience lots of different emotions, ups and downs all the time, to help people who struggle with thoughts of suicide and self-harm, and also to help people who struggle with relationships with other people. So DBT so stands for dialectical behaviour therapy. So dialectical is so two things that are seemingly opposite that may all be true at the same time. So that could be something like I'm doing the best I can, but I'm still not managing, and I need to be able to learn how to cope better. So that's probably the biggest, what we would call dialectic, that we would have in therapy. And then behavior is obviously what we do, and then therapy is you know, the act of kind of sitting in a room with somebody and talking through your difficulties and thinking about ways that you know, you might be able to overcome them, or things that might be helpful.
And CAMHS offer this, CAMHS offer this, don't they, for young people? And isn't it very effective, or much more effective than CBT for young people with autism? Is that the... That's what we've been told. I don't know whether that's true.
There isn't any evidence to say that it's more effective for young people with autism.
Okay.
So I'm not sure where that's come from, but I haven't seen any papers to say that is the case. We do offer this therapy. It is really intensive. So if somebody has DBT therapy, then they need to attend a group once a week, and then also a one-to-one session once a week as well. And they need to commit for 6 months. So we do have to reserve it for sort of people that are in the most amounts of clinical need. We do offer something that's a little bit less intensive, which is emotional coping skills, and we do that, which is sort of 8 weeks, just looking at the skills, because the way DBT works is it's based on mindfulness. So we teach mindfulness. So you have 2 weeks of mindfulness and then 4 weeks of a module, and then there are 4 modules. So there's a module on distress tolerance, which is based on the premise of there are going to be things in life that happen that upset us, that cause us distress, and we need to be able to tolerate that to a certain extent. So how do we tolerate distressing feelings in the moment? We have a module on emotional regulation. So that's basically about kind of being able to regulate our emotions. And then we have a session on something called walking the middle path, which is really about when you take an extreme viewpoint or an extreme position. So I suppose an example of that would be when a young person takes the position of I should be able to go out and do whatever I want, and parents take the position of I want to keep you safe, so actually you're grounded and you're staying in. And how do you get to a sort of middle ground? And then we do something called interpersonal effectiveness, which is about how do you manage your emotions with other people, so that you're getting your needs met, but you're also being able to preserve those relationships. So it's 2 weeks of mindfulness, 4 weeks of a module, 2 weeks of mindfulness, 4 weeks of a module, and you go around the wheel, if you like, until you've completed all of it.
That is quite intensive.
Yes. So we do that for young people here, and we have the emotional coping skills, which is a sort of 8-week group that just looks at some of the skills that's sort of less intensive, and we run that 4 times a year. So
okay. And are you referred on to that by a CAMHS practitioner? Is that sort of the pathway to get to it?
yeah, so you have to have an initial assessment first, and then you get to refer to the pathway by a CAMHS practitioner, and then you'll see someone who's trained in DBT, and they'll do what's called a formulation session with you. So they'll think about the difficulties you're experiencing and which skills would best fit for you, and then also think about, is it the right type of therapy, and also think about the level of commitment with you, because some people will find it hard to actually engage and commit. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, thank you. That's a useful little sort of bit of knowledge for everyone, just well, for me to know a bit more about DBT. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to put a PowerPoint up. Like I said, I have adapted it a little bit from what we would do with young people, and I can send out kind of like worksheets and things that go with it.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I'm hopefully going to be able to share my screen, which I'm guessing
I hope you should be able to.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, and I'm going to start the slideshow. Right, so you can see my screen, can you?
Yes, yeah, we can see it.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to start the slideshow from the beginning. So today we're talking about emotional regulation. So there's quite a lot of things here, and I've probably got, I've probably got about an hour. So in terms of session overview, we've got emotional regulation skills and why we do it, really. The goals of emotional regulation training. We're going to think a little bit about the function of emotions. So why is it useful? Why do we do it, really? What are emotions useful for? We'll look at the model of emotions, and then I'll go through some of these skills. So we've got A, B, C, please skills. Then we're talk about accumulating positive experiences, building mastery, coping ahead, please skills, checking the facts and problem solving, and opposite action. And like I say, so we'll probably go through these as a bit of a whistle stop, but I can send out some sheets and a little workbook later on.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess just a bit of a check-in for all of us to just think a little bit about how are we feeling today? And, you know, obviously, if anything in this session brings anything up for people that's a bit difficult or a bit tricky, then I'm sure Jill will be happy to speak with you afterwards, or you can message her in the chat. But just sort of to say that obviously we need to look after ourselves as well as our young people. So I actually use quite a lot of these DBT skills myself, as well as teaching them to young people. So it can be quite useful to just think about looking after our own emotional health. because it's difficult when you're trying to look after somebody else. You still need to be able to look after yourself. So I just thought I'd start with that, really. Okay, so emotional regulation skills really are there to help you feel less emotionally vulnerable, feel more in control, in command of your emotions, and for us to learn how to experience emotions like a wave, really. So the way that we like to put it to people is to say that, you know, that you are the captain of your own ship, as it were. So it's about learning some things that are just going to give you a little bit of extra control, I suppose, if you like, really, and just give you a little bit of extra kind of ability to cope and to manage with things. So that's kind of what we're kind of looking towards doing here. So I mean, I guess the other thing for us to think about is why bother? Why do we bother teaching this? So I guess if somebody is emotionally dysregulated, what we will often see is somebody who will have really intense emotions. So really intense anger, really intense frustration, depression, or anxiety. And I don't know whether that's something that, you know, parents have noticed in some of their young people, but that's kind of what we would be expecting to see. So, you know, you might see behaviours that might include things like, you know, massive explosions of anger, screaming and shouting, might be things like missing school, maybe actually cutting off a little bit, so avoiding people or avoiding taking care of responsibilities. Might also see things like, you know, expressions of suicide and self-harm. So you might see all those sorts of things. You know, you might find lots of problematic kind of behaviours that you see, you know, walking away, not wanting to talk to you, not engaging with teachers, all of those sorts of things. And I guess it's really difficult as a parent when you're faced with that and you just think, well, what do we do here? You know, what do we do with this? And I guess it's important to say that you would get this alongside lots of different diagnoses, but it may be actually that your young person doesn't have a diagnosis, but actually what they do have is that they're just struggling to regulate themselves. Yeah. And you will,
we hear this a lot. I think there'll be a lot of families that can totally identify with this.
And the other thing to say is also that you will potentially see quite a significant amount of emotional dysregulation with young people who've got ADHD. And it is a part of ADHD, but it's probably a part that services probably are less good at treating, really, I would say. And I can go on to talk about some things about that later on at the end, about what we might be thinking about doing about that. But it's certainly something that I've noticed. And obviously ADHD medications can help to some extent, but they may not be able to fully support with the emotional dysregulation that goes alongside that. Okay, so if we're thinking about the goals of why we teach this to young people, the goals are really to support young people and parents to perhaps learn why emotions are important, think about identifying emotions, because actually sometimes people don't know what they're feeling, don't understand what they're feeling. I think especially young people with autism, they'll struggle to identify emotions, struggle to really know, or maybe even understand, maybe they don't know what they're feeling. So to think with people about, you know, what they're feeling and why, and then also to think about reducing emotional vulnerability. So there are things that we can all do in our lives just to increase our resilience and reduce the vulnerability that we may have to being kind of dysregulated. And they, you know, none of it is rocket science. You're probably going to, at the end of this, be like, well, we knew all of that already. But I guess sometimes it's useful just to point that out sometimes. And then I suppose the idea is that by understanding kind of the frequency, understanding why we have these vulnerable emotions, reducing our vulnerability, we're decreasing the frequency of our unwanted emotions. And we're trying to increase the amount of positive emotions that we feel. And hopefully to decrease emotional suffering. So that's really the reason why we teach these skills. So again, and understand, in terms of emotions, it's about the first step really is understanding our emotions. So what we do is I don't know if people have done mindfulness, but we do a lot of mindfulness, and there are some really good apps out there that you can use. So Headspace is one, or the Calm app is another. If people do also have things that they already subscribe to, like Spotify or Deezer, you can find lots of free podcasts as well that will have sort of mindfulness. And what mindfulness is, it's about paying attention in the moment. So the way that I'd normally like to describe it is about tuning out all of that noise in your head, all of those different thoughts, all of those different judgments, and just trying to give yourself a little bit of a breather, really, even if that's just for 2 minutes or 5 minutes. There can be lots of different ways of doing mindfulness. So you can have the very traditional kind of more meditation type mindfulness, but actually lots of things can be mindful. So you can, if you kind of really focus on it, having a shower can be mindful. You can mindfully cook dinner. There are lots of kind of practical things that you can do, or even, if you throw yourself into playing a game or something like that. So it doesn't have to be that traditional sitting down kind of exercise. And one of the it's a bit difficult over Zoom, so if I had you all in a room, what I would be doing with you now is I'd be asking you to get a pen and putting it in your non-dominant hand, so whichever hand you don't write with, and I'd be asking you to draw a picture of a cow. And that might sound really strange, but just try it, and then sit back afterwards and think about whether you had any other thoughts while you were trying to do that. Because the first time I did it, I found it really, really difficult to think or do anything else apart from just focus on drawing a picture of a cow with my left hand. So it's just to teach us that actually you don't have to do that traditional mindfulness. It is just about finding a task or an activity that can completely absorb you for a period of time to tune out all that noise in your brain.
I love that idea. I think we'll add that to our resilience course. Our recharge course that we do is another extra bit of mindfulness. I really like, I struggle, and I know other people do, with kind of the traditional mindfulness, but I love that idea. Right, we'll be nicking that one.
Yeah, no, still that one. That's a really good exercise. Another one, again, this one works face to face. You can't do this one on Zoom, but another one that's quite fun that we do with young people is we pair people up, and then I say to everyone, turn your backs to each other, and then everyone has to change something about their appearance. And then you turn around, and then you have to look at that other person and work out what it is that they've changed.
I like that as well.
Some people can be really sneaky about that. So you have to be really good at observing things, and like paying attention in that moment. So that's another one. And then another one was, if you listen to the song Happy and try and count how many times they say the word happy.
I like that as well. I love that I can do this with, certainly with my youngest child would be really up for trying to do these kinds of things, but not even realize that she's just focused and being mindful.
Yeah. And that's the idea, is about finding activities that maybe people don't realize they're being mindful or practicing mindfulness, but you can do that some really practical ways, because I know a lot of people do struggle with the more traditional meditation mindfulness, and there are other ways to do it. So yeah, so it's useful to think about that. Yeah, so emotion vulnerability. So we're thinking about decreasing the frequency of unwanted emotions, and sometimes we need to try and let things go using mindfulness skills, or even, like I say, just tune out some of that noise, give ourselves a breather. Yeah. So again, this is just an exercise we do with the young people, can do it with ourselves as well. Just we have like a short list of emotions, and we just get them to sit and think about, you know, how many of these they've experienced in the week, get them to circle it and to think about it, and then we discuss that in the group. I guess if you've got a young person that is saying, oh, I don't know how I'm feeling, I'm really struggling, it's something you may be able to sit down and do with them and just help them think about, you know, what it is that's making things difficult. So I don't know if we're going to have time to watch this YouTube video, but we can have a look. So this is about what emotions are useful for. I don't know if this link will work. It's saying no at the moment. So I'll send you over the slides and people can watch the YouTube link.
Yeah, that would be really useful. Thank you.
So I suppose the essence of this is that emotions are useful. So even bad emotions are useful. So they give us information, basically. Yeah, so they signal to us that something's happening. So for example, you know, if we're out at night and we're on our own in the dark and we've got a feeling of nervousness or anxiety, that's actually preparing us to, you know, for action in case, you know, there's a threat and something needs to happen. So that's our body, I suppose, trying to protect us, really, in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I guess the problem is that our emotions or those gut feelings aren't facts. So, and now in the kind of modern world, there are lots of things that happen that our brain interprets as threats. So the bit of our brain, the little almond part of our brain called the amygdala, that kind of determines, you know, what's a threat and what isn't, and hijacks our brain and suddenly puts us into that fight, flight and freeze mode, isn't really great at determining what's a real threat and what's something that is just making us feel a little bit unpleasant or something that's a little bit difficult. So it can't really tell the difference between us being in a dark alley or, you know, us stepping into the road and a bus suddenly coming towards us, or us getting a text message from someone that says some really hurtful things that's really upsetting. Yeah. And so then what will happen is we'll get put into that heightened state of emotion, that fight, flight and freeze mode. And the reason that our bodies does that is it communicates things to us. It helps prepare us for action. And also it communicates to and influences other people around us as well. So, for example, you know, our facial expressions, our body posture, they say a lot about how we're feeling, whether we realize it or not. Yeah. So, for example, a sad face might, you know, prompt someone to come and ask you if you're okay and give you some support. If you're looking really cross and angry, that might signal to other people that maybe they need to back off a bit, give you a little bit of space. So emotions are often just our way of kind of communicating things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess we can also sometimes misinterpret emotions as well. So, for example, if I sit here and I just sort of stare straight ahead and I look like this, what might people think if they just saw that? What would you think, do you think?
I think you'd frozen on Zoom and have a panic, first of all, or maybe that you're not interested, that you're bored, that you're perhaps sort of not listening.
Yeah. But it also could be a sign that I was concentrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it could be a sign that something was, that something confused me a little bit. It could just be my natural resting face.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we often interpret things using our own filters, but actually we don't necessarily know what the other person is feeling. So I guess none of these things are facts. So we often just need to check out what the facts are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that all kind of make sense to people?
It does to me. I can't see anyone else because I'm recording, but hopefully
That's
people
right.
put in the chat box or let us know if it's if
It
they
doesn't
need a
make
bit more.
sense.
Yeah, if you need a bit more explanation, please let us know.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. So I guess what we need to think about now is, I guess, so urges and actions are not the same. So we both might have urges to do things, but that doesn't mean we're always going to act on them, just in the same way that we may think about, have thoughts, but they don't always mean that we're going to act on those thoughts. Those all very, I suppose, it's all about us learning to kind of manage some of these things. So one of the things we're going to look at are ABC please skills. So I'm actually going to get the workbook up, okay, and just show you the bit out of the workbook, if that's okay. So just bear with me a second while I get the little workbook up, because it's probably going to make more sense, I think, if I show you the actual workbook. So let me just get that up now.
So I guess all of this is kind of about helping our young people recognize their emotions to start with, and then you can start unpicking where it can be going wrong. And I know for some young people, they're very impulsive, and some they really struggle to be able to recognize their emotions. So I think this is really helpful to kind of know where to start from, really, so that you can know how to try and support them.
That is, yeah, so that is the idea, that we are, trying to find out where it's going wrong first, and then we're trying to figure out, what we can do to support that young person. So I'm just going to share with you some of the skills now from the workbook. So I'm just opening it now for editing, just because I think that might be more helpful than what's on the slides. So so this is the handbook that we use in DBT. So we've got our plans for each week. So you can see that we do our mindfulness every day. So we've got 12 ways to practice mindfulness here. So lots of different ideas there. Some of them more traditional, some of them not. And then we've got talking about not letting our emotions control us and how we're understanding them all. And then we're thinking here about what the basic emotions are and the purpose for each one. So anger and fear, protecting us from danger, anticipation, surprise, joy, sadness. So thinking about that they're all communicating something to us. Okay, and then we talked about how they motivate us for action, and we've got some worksheets here as well. And then ABC please skills. So it's about weighing up the positive and the negatives in our life and increasing the amounts of positives. So it's about accumulating positive experiences, something that we call building mastery, coping ahead of time with emotional situations, treating physical illness. So obviously our physical selves are really important. It's very difficult to feel kind of buoyant or to be able to manage our emotions if we're in lots of pain, for example. Yeah, if you've ever tried to kind of face the day with a massive toothache, you'll probably know what I mean. Yeah, it's going to definitely make you feel a little bit grumpy and again, with your mood, it causes you difficulties. Balanced eating as well. So that's about, making sure that we don't let our blood sugars dip too low, making sure that we don't, we're just being balanced, really. Things like avoiding any mood altering substances, things like cannabis, alcohol, other drugs, balancing sleep, and making sure we get enough exercise. So again, these are all really simple things, but they do all really have a rationale against them. So what we try and do is think about getting a list of positive experiences. So this might be something you'd want to do in times when you're feeling calm. So think about what a good short-term positive experiences that you could do, okay, and then what are more long-term positive experiences, and then try and do those things mindfully. So try and, when we're trying to do the tasks or the experiences that we find positive, to really focus on them and try and really get as much as we can out of them, and just use them as a little bit of a breather really from everyday life, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it is backed by research. So it has been shown to reduce depression in individuals, regardless of whether they do anything else. It increases our resilience, so it reduces our emotional vulnerability. That's why employers tell people they need to be taking regular annual leave. It's why people do things like go on spa days, yeah, go and get their nails done, meet friends for coffee. All of those things sound really simple, but they're just the little things that give you that little bit of a pick-me-up and just help improve your resilience. So the skill is really just doing the activity. And I guess sometimes we can neglect this because, you know, it's about, you've got to get up, you've got to have breakfast, you've got to get yourself to school, then you've got to come home, you've got to do your homework, you know, you've got to have your bath, you've got to get to bed. So, you know, we can get really wrapped up in the sort of rat race of everyday life. And actually, it's really important for us to remember that we need to, you know, just take some time out to do things that we enjoy and that we like. And if people struggle to think of things, we actually have a little list that give people ideas, and we encourage people to write their own lists. So again, there are lists of things that a young person might want to do by themselves, but then the other thing is about having parent-child shared pleasant activities. And I think that's really important, not just in terms of kind of emotional dysregulation, but also in terms of building some of that bond and that attachment. And having some shared positive experiences will help people feel more connected to each other. Because I suppose for example, Jill, if every time you and I spoke, I was really mean to you and we had an argument, you probably wouldn't feel very positive about me, would you?
No, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably avoid you.
Yeah, you'd probably avoid me. You'd probably go, oh God, that Natascha and CAMHS, I really don't want to speak to her today.
That's it.
Whereas if every time we spoke, we had a really nice conversation, you know, we did something that was positive, you'd be feeling much more positive about wanting to see me and spend time with me. It's the same with our young people. If every time we spend time with a young person, we're butting heads with them, you know, it's going to make it more difficult to have those positive times. So we need to think about, no matter how much someone frustrates us or how difficult it is, about trying to think of what are the things that we can do together that are going to be good, that are going to be fun, that we're going to enjoy. Yeah. And it could be really simple things, you know. Some of this, it's not about spending lots of money, you know. It could be just about, you know, going out for a dog walk together, yeah, you know, doing some baking together, watching your favorite TV program together, yeah. So it isn't always about, you know, spending loads of money and taking someone to Thorpe Park, you know. That will work as well sometimes, but you know, it's about the little things as well. Yeah. Okay. So in the long term, we're thinking about, and that's one of the things in DBT that we talk about a lot, is building a life worth living. So that's why we do these things, to think about, you know, identifying things that we want to do, identifying goals that are to do with our values, and just building a life worth living. So we talk about something called wise mind in DBT. I don't know if people know what wise mind is.
No, I don't. I don't know about anyone else.
So we have, so we talk about 3 states of mind. So we have something called emotional mind. So that's when we're kind of very emotional in the moment, quite dysregulated, and we might be acting on our feelings, acting on our emotions. And then we have something called rational mind. So that's where perhaps we're feeling quite cut off from things. So rather than thinking about how we're feeling or our emotions, we're very much focused on the practical things we need to do in the day. So something bad might happen and we might just feel really cut off for it and be like, right, okay, well, I'm not going to deal with that now because, you know, I've got the shopping to do. And then the next thing I need to do is I need to write a list and I need to go here and I need to do this. And the idea is that it's not good to be an emotional mind and acting on kind of anger or sadness or impulse all the time, but it's also not good to ignore your emotions and push them away too much either. So we try and encourage people to get into things called wise mind, where we're taking into account our emotions, but we're also acting in a way that is, you know, where we're not going to do any damage to relationships with others or do any damage to ourselves, and acting in a way where we're going to get the best outcome from any interaction or anything that we do.
Okay, how do you broach this if you've got a, you know, an angry young person who sort of every time you try and connect with them, they just, you know, always ends in meltdowns and anger? How do you get past that so that you can start working with them on regulating their emotions?
So I think when they're in the moment and they're kind of in that anger, I would say the best thing to do is not get into an argument, not get into a row with them. Try and maintain calm yourself. Yeah, because that's really important. Try and maintain the calm yourself, because if you become angry, then you're going to feed off each other and it will just escalate the situation more and more. And then, you know, there is a time shelf to those intense limits of anger. For some people it'll be minutes, for some people it'll be hours, but your young person will have a time limit. And then once they've calmed down, it will be then about sitting down with them and saying, okay, so you were really angry, you know, there, you know, you were really upset. We need to think about, you know, obviously I don't want you to be feeling angry and upset because that's not very nice for you. So how do we think about avoiding this in the future?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And coming up with a plan with them.
Yes.
So yeah, so, you know, and a plan could be doing some fun activities with them. It could be thinking about paying attention to relationships. So yeah, so this is about sort of, yeah, accumulating positive relationships and then thinking about wise mind values. So attending to our relationships, thinking about, are they part of a social group? Do they need to be part of a social group? Do they have close friends? You know, what do they need to do in terms of being responsibility, making sure they're having fun as well. So it's about thinking about what's important to that young person, what fits in with their values and your values as a family, and then finding out what the activities are. So again, these are just things that we teach. I'm just trying to go through and think about here. So the B stands for building mastery. So that's about thinking about kind of, I suppose, practicing some of these skills and kind of feeling in control. And then the C is about coping ahead. So has anyone ever thought about doing a cope ahead plan for something that might be happening in the future? Has that been a thing that anyone's ever thought about?
We've talked about, and we've done quite a lot on coping and resilience plans. Is it a similar thing to that?
Yeah, so very, very similar. So a cope ahead plan would be about perhaps looking in the week and thinking, okay, where are the trigger points? Where are the flash points? What, you know, what in this week is going to make me feel irritable or angry or sad or upset? And then thinking about a plan to either add in some positives into that week to kind of mitigate some of that, or using the things that are in your kind of coping ahead and resilience plan to be able to mitigate or manage some of that distress and that emotion. So again, this is a handout we have about food and mood. So thinking about how certain foods might affect our moods, and thinking about what gives us kind of slow and steady energy, and then thinking about what helps us kind of, improve our mood really and boost our health. And ask us to notice if we're eating too much or eating too little. And then obviously if we're thinking about making changes to diet, it's best to do it slowly. Obviously, if people have got special dietary needs or things like that, then it's about consulting, your doctor or GP or nutritionist if you see a nutritionist. Yeah, but these are just general tips, really. I mean, we talk a lot about sleep hygiene as well, and that has a massive part to play in terms of managing our emotions and regulating our emotions.
And that's a tricky area for lots of our families, the getting young people to eat, especially those that are really restrictive in their diet, and sleep comes up time and time again as two of the biggest factors that we hear about impacting on our young people.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I think sometimes you have to practice sleep hygiene as well, because it doesn't always come naturally, because it's really easy to be on your phone at bedtime, isn't it? Scrolling through your phone. It's really easy to do that. It's probably harder to put the phone down and, I don't know, pick up a book or listen to some soothing music, so sometimes it is practice. I think, for me it's caffeine. I drink loads and loads of tea. Really, I need to start, switching out, caffeinated tea for herbal tea or something at night time.
Yeah, and it's hard, I know, with my kids, the battle of trying to get them even just to stay in bed, and the fight. So, and then the impact that then has on their mood when they're tired and grouchy, and so it goes on, and then I'm tired, and so it's really hard. It's definitely a hard one to fix the sleep.
And I'm not saying any of this is easy, because if it was easy, we wouldn't have to be doing things like DBT skills, and we wouldn't have to be sitting here thinking about, about how we do all of this. So, I would say it isn't easy. This sort of skill here is probably more difficult. So this is about trying to experience emotions as a wave and just trying to sit with your distress. And this is something we do try and practice, but I think we do need to normalize some of this as well, because we are going to experience unpleasant emotions and have unpleasant things happen to us, and that is a normal part of life. And we're all going to experience a certain amount of distress. And I think actually young people sometimes think that life should be brilliant and happy and wonderful all of the time. And actually we do need to normalize that there are going to be times when it's normal to feel down and normal to feel sad, normal to feel angry, and that's okay.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think I can't remember if it was you I was talking to, or of course we were on last week, and how young people, when they experience these emotions for the first time, first heartbreak, first bereavement, and how it can completely consume them. And it is about making them realize that is part of life, isn't it? And that you have to sort of work your way through it. And
and to validate that as well, because I think, especially, that first heartbreak, that first bereavement, all of those firsts, if you're somebody that's perhaps experienced some of those things a few times, or someone that, has kind of perhaps, a bit older, you're a bit more removed from what those things felt like, it can be really easy to go, oh, you've only been going out with this person for 3 months. For goodness sake, pull yourself together. I don't know why you're so upset about this. You'll meet someone else in 2 weeks. Well, as an adult and a parent, you might know that that's probably what's going to happen. But actually, if you put yourself into the mind of the young person at that period of time, it's not like that for them. that feeling, that emotion is all consuming. And actually saying something like that, which you think from your perspective might be reassuring, because what you're trying to say to them is, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay, you're not going to feel like this forever, and you'll move on, it'll be fine. But actually that's not what they want to hear, and to them that's not validating. So that type of response might actually inflame the situation. So we might think we're being helpful, but actually if we're looking at it from a different perspective, maybe we're not being helpful, and maybe a different response, you know, some validating of that emotion. Maybe they don't want us to do anything, because sometimes the other trap that we can fall into is, I need to do something to make this better, and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to say to you, I don't know what you want me to do about this. Again, sometimes from the young person's perspective, that's not particularly helpful, because it doesn't feel containing, because what you're communicating by that is I can't handle what you're telling me. And what the young person needs to hear is, I can handle what you're saying to me, I understand what you're telling me, and you know, I'm going to be there for you. So we need to try and, if we can, remember what it was like being, you know, the one experiencing that heartbreak for the first time, you know, and how all consuming that was. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is difficult though, especially when you're really busy, and you know, you might have, you know, another 2 children that have also got needs that you need to be balancing and looking after. And I'm not saying any of this is easy at all. Because like I say, if it was, you know, we wouldn't have so many young people in CAMHS, and we wouldn't, you know, as a society be all struggling.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think, yeah, and again, the other thing that we try and think about is checking the facts. So, you know, thinking with the young person, are they interpreting the situation correctly? Could there be another explanation? Is the reason that, you know, Jennifer isn't replying to their WhatsApp message because she really hates them and doesn't like them anymore? Or is it because actually she might be at her, you know, after school club and she's not looking at her phone right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So all that, you know, she's lost her Wi-Fi connection, or she's lost her phone, or, you know, there could be other explanations for, or interpretations for the problem. And then thinking, are we thinking about something in extremes? So are we catastrophizing it? Are we going into all or nothing mode? Is there a middle point? And then thinking, okay, well, even if the worst has happened, okay, how can we imagine coping with that? Yeah. What's the worst that can happen, and how can we imagine coping with that? And then thinking with the young person, what needs to happen for you to feel okay? So what do we need to do right now so that you're going to feel okay? And thinking about that. Brainstorm lots of different solutions, you know, thinking about, you know, all the different possible solutions, and then narrow it down with them. Yeah, if you can. Maybe think about pros and cons lists as well. So, you know, what are the, rather than telling the young person what they should do, okay, well, if you go down this route, what, you know, what are the pros of doing that? What are the cons of doing that? Support them to think things through, especially teenagers who don't like being told what to do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it can be helpful to go, well, okay, you could do that. What do you think will happen if you do that? You know, let's just think about the pros and cons of that for a sec. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about my children. I'm just like, yeah, I need to do that more. Less rushed mom, and more just taking a bit of time to stop and unpick things, I think is, yeah, really important.
And that's the thing, all of this stuff takes time.
Yeah.
It does. And then actually, the other thing that we probably don't do very often is if a young person, I'm just going to stop sharing now, if a young person has dealt with the situation really well, even if we think, well, actually, well, that's just how they should be dealing with it. But actually, if a young person who struggles deals with something really well and in a way that we didn't expect, tell them, make a fuss of it, make a big deal of it, you know, give them a reward, you know, even if it's something little like, I'll take you out to Costa because you did so well there, you know, when you had that problem with that teacher at school, you know 2 months ago you'd have massively flown off the handle, but actually, you know, what you did today was you went and you spoke to your head of year and you sorted that out really calmly. Make a massive deal out of it, because, you know, actually young people want to be recognised when they make changes and when they do things differently. A lot of the young people, when they come and see me, they're like, well, I didn't fly off the handle like I do normally, but nobody told me, well done. So I don't know why I bother, because to them, it's a lot of effort.
Yes.
You know, for them, if somebody's normally dealing with this situation with a sort of negative way, and then they don't, and they make all that effort to deal with it differently, if that goes unrecognised, that's a massive blow to them. You know, that is a massive.
A really good point. Absolutely. I think it's just like slowing everything down a little bit, isn't it? And just helping them. Yeah. No, that's a really good point.
So I mean, I've got a bit of time now for some questions. I hope some of what I've gone through has been helpful. Sorry if I sort of stopped the slides a bit because I thought actually, you know, some of it probably didn't go into the same amount of detail. And like I say, I can get I might put a special work bit together and just send it across.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I really would like to kind of read through and digest everything you've said and have some things I can print out and use. Would be really, really good.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Print out and use are really helpful.
Yes. Right, let's have a look, see if we've got any questions coming up in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free. Yeah, just some Laura said that she did DBT as a teenager and it was amazing, so that's really good. Sarah tried to concentrate on the positive, not negative all the time. Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get stuck in that sort of cycle of doing it. Does anyone else have any other questions that they wanted to ask? Right, okay. How do you unpick emotions when they barely understand them? That's from Laura.
I guess very, very slowly. So, you know, just starting off with, you know, thinking about, so for example, if your son basically knows sad, happy, and maybe angry. Yeah. So, okay. So if we pick, say, something like angry, for example, thinking about, I suppose it's thinking about, you know, if you take the particular situations, you need to do it when they're calm and they're not in that emotion. So think about, you know, what happened before they became angry. Yeah, you might need to go in a bit of detail. Then think about what happened to make them feel angry. And then think about with them, is that because they were scared of something? Is that because they thought something was going to happen that didn't happen? Yeah. So just really, really slowly, I would say. And the same with, you know, with sadness, because again, you know, somebody might say, well, I don't really understand why I felt so upset about that. But then it might be that actually they've just had a really bad week and it wasn't, you know, their friend sending them that message. That was just the thing that tipped them over the edge. Because if we think about our emotions and things like a bottle, yeah, if we fill it all up and we've got no way of releasing it, and then something just goes on top, you know, that just makes it overfill, that's when we get those overfillings. But in terms of if people, you know, basically know sad, happy, and angry, then just talk to them in their own kind of language, really, and then just think about, you know, what are the things that make you feel sad? Let's think about those things. What are the things that might make you feel angry? What makes you feel happy? Yeah.
Yeah, we used to do on a really sorry, on a really basic level with my son, we used to have just like some pictures, like almost like the emojis on the fridge, so we could all identify how we were feeling that day, and then talk about it and use a mirror with him to see if he could make the happy face, the sad face, the angry face, and what my face might look like, and try to just, you know, get those certainly when he was much younger, just to try and understand a little bit more around those feelings, and what what you then might do from having those feelings. So when I'm happy, I do this. When I'm sad, I do that, and kind of unpicked it on a really basic level to start with him, to help him sort of learn and understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. And and just use their language, like you say, Joe, on a really basic level. You know, when I'm happy, I do this. When I'm sad, I do that. Does your child have to go through CBT before accessing DBT? No, they're very different interventions. You don't have to do CBT before accessing DBT. What I will say at the moment is, because we've had some staff leave that we trained up, we do have a bit of a waiting list for DBT at the moment. It's much longer than I would like right this minute. We have had some new staff join, and I am getting them training, so that will come down. But right this minute, we do have a longer waiting list than I would ideally want.
It's just nice to know all these things that we can do, kind of, even if you're on a waiting list, while you're waiting, all the things you can access and try, you know, with your young person. I found it really helpful. I don't know if anyone else got any other questions they want to ask. But personally, I need to go back and watch this again and kind of unpick what I can do with my three.
I will put together, give me a week or two, I'll put together a slightly modified workbook.
Fantastic.
And send it through to you.
Yeah, that's great. Right, I'm not seeing any other questions come up. So, oh no, there we go. Almost. There's a long one. So, he's not going to school only once a week, not sleeping, not eating properly, getting very angry and hurting himself. If we try to speak to him, he wants to just be left alone. We try to do things that he likes, like swimming, playing drums, but he's also interested in drugs. So I guess how do you unpick that one? It's quite a complex case.
Yeah, so I think that's quite complex. I suppose I'd be thinking about when these things started, and you know, what was going on. Is there anything happening, you know, at school that means that he's not wanting to go to school? Is he struggling, you know, is there struggles with work or anything like that? I guess I don't want to get into too many personal things with that, so maybe Jill, if you want, I can be put in touch with Madalena, and I can maybe talk with her in a bit more detail privately.
Yeah, absolutely. Madalena, if you drop me a message either on Messenger or email me, and then we can link you together, that's really kind. Thank you for offering that, Natasha. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. But yeah, I mean, in terms of generic advice, I could give some, but actually I don't want to get into too many personal things on a recorded call.
Yeah, absolutely. The Facebook page is just the Reminds Facebook page. If you do Facebook/groups/Reminds, you'll find us. It's the private Facebook group. I'm just scrolling through, seeing if there's anything else. The link also to this will be, once it's up, hopefully later on today, will be put on to the Facebook group as well, and then shared on the website. So hopefully everyone can get hold of it. I know there are a lot of people that are keen to watch it that couldn't make it today. So, right, I think that we might be just about done. Thank you ever so much, Natasha. It's been really, really useful. Lots and lots of information to go away and think about. So thank you, and thanks everyone for coming along today.
Thank you all.
It's really nice to have everyone here. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone.